Today is a big news day, and the big news is out of Acura, where we're getting an all-new Acura TLX that is definitely focused more on sport and luxury than any TLX before. It's also going to be the Acura Flagship sedan now, because it looks like the RLX is going off into the sunset, and it doesn't look like there's going to be a replacement. First, let's dive into the pictures, and then let's talk about what's new. As you can see, it wears a larger version of the Acura grille that we've seen in a number of Acura models before. We have some pretty angry headlamps up front, and I think that overall the diamond grille shape works a little bit better with this Acura than really most of the lineup so far. If you get the upcoming Type S version of the TLX, then we get a slightly angrier grille, we get a lot of blacked out accents, and we get some very attractive wheels with much larger brakes as well. If you go around to the side of the TLX, you'll notice that we still have a pretty long front overhang because this is still going to be a front-wheel drive based vehicle with a transverse engine. But they've pulled a little bit of a trick out of Volvo's playbook, and they've really stretched the dash-to-axle ratio in this vehicle, giving it a much more rear-wheel drive look from the side, even though we still have that slightly longer front overhang. There are a lot of details we don't know just yet about the TLX, but we do know it's going to have a stretched wheelbase versus the current generation. We know it's going to be longer, we know it's going to be wider, and we're told it's going to ride on a unique platform that is dedicated just to Acura vehicles. The TLX has long been a BMW 5 Series sized vehicle with a BMW 3 Series sized price tag, and that is going to continue for the new model as well. The first engine available in the TLX is pretty much what we all expected. It's Acura's 2-liter turbocharged engine that we find under the hood of the Acura RDX and, of course, the Honda Accord as well. And like those two vehicles, it's mated to their 10-speed automatic transmission, which is an excellent transmission. It is significantly smoother than the ZF 9-speed transmission that we find in the current generation Acura TLX and a number of other Honda, Land Rover, and FCA products. The big advantage to the 10-speed automatic is that it has a very, very aggressive first gear ratio, and that really gives you a very strong launch. So I expect that to all roll down to the TLX as well. Fortunately, we already know the 2-liter turbo's output numbers, 272 horsepower, 280 pound-feet of torque, making this one of the most powerful base engines in the segment. Really, something like the Alfa Romeo Giulia and the Mercedes-Benz GLC 300 are likely going to be the only competitors that are going to give you similar or perhaps even slightly better base performance, versus the outgoing 2.4-liter base engine that's 66 more horsepower and a whopping 98 pound-feet of torque. In fact, this produces more torque than the outgoing 3.5-liter V6, and we're told more low-end torque than that model as well. It does produce 18 fewer horsepower, but it's probably going to give you better overall 0 to 60 performance than the old 3.5-liter V6. So even the base entry is going to be faster than the outgoing, most powerful version. The big question, of course, is what's going on in the Type S, and on their spec sheet we have a big old question mark right there. Nothing has been announced for the all-new twin-turbo V6 engine. We're told that this is going to be exclusive to the Acura lineup, so expect to see other Acuras with the twin-turbo V6 at some point in the future. Hopefully that will make its way down to the Acura RDX and, of course, the Acura MDX. Those could be an awful lot of fun with extra power. If I'm going to go out on a limb and make some prognostications here, I'm going to guess that it's going to be at least 350 to 360 horsepower. My personal hope is that it's somewhere around 400 horsepower. The reason for that is that Acura is positioning the TLX Type S not quite as a competitor to the S60 T6 all-wheel drive, which produces 316 horsepower, but by what I've seen so far, probably more of a competitor to something like a Mercedes-Benz C43 AMG or perhaps even a BMW M340i. And in that comparison, it's going to need to go 0 to 60 in about 4.6 to 4.8 seconds. That means probably around 380 to 400 horsepower. We don't know exactly how much power and how much torque this Acura 10-speed transmission can handle, but let's hope that it's definitely more than we find, for instance, in a Lincoln Continental. Lincoln Continental is kind of an odd one to talk about here, but it also has a transverse 3-liter twin-turbo 6-cylinder engine. Happens to produce 400 horsepower as well, but unfortunately the Ford automatic transmission that we find under its hood can't handle that much torque in the lower gears, and that's why overall 0 to 60 performance is not as competitive as those numbers might indicate. Let's hope that Acura has solved that problem. The only hint at that 3-liter Turbo 6 performance is right here in the press release where it says more than 50% increase in low-end torque versus the outgoing 3.5-liter V6. Now again, we don't know too many details about exactly what that means. I suspect somewhere in the perhaps 300 to 350 pound-foot of torque range, perhaps not quite as torquey as some of those 3-liter inline 6s or V6s that we see in the German competition, but it might be fairly close. For 2021, even the base engine is going to be available with all-wheel drive. Previously, you could only get all-wheel drive on the 3.5-liter V6. All-wheel drive will, of course, be standard in the Type S. Acura's super handling all-wheel drive system is quite interesting, and the TLX is going to get the latest 4th generation of super handling all-wheel drive. The key difference between super handling all-wheel drive and, for instance, Volvo's all-wheel drive system, they also use transverse engines, is that the Acura system can send more power to the rear axle, and it can do it more consistently over a broader range of operating conditions than we find in the Volvo system. The key thing here is that we have a clutch pack that can connect more frequently and can handle more heat. We have a torque vectoring rear axle, which can send 100% of the power destined to the rear to a single wheel, left or right, whenever it feels like it. And then the rear axle, interestingly enough, is overdriven versus the front axle. We actually have a different final drive ratio back there that makes the rear wheels, when everything is connected, spin 2.9% faster than the front wheels. And that has always been the key innovation with super handling all-wheel drive. In a standard all-wheel drive system, when the clutch pack is connected and the input for the front differential and the rear differential are connected together 100%, you can only send 50% of power to one axle or the other, assuming there's no wheel slip. With the Acura super handling all-wheel drive system, overdriving the rear axle effectively puts more power to the rear, and it allows the vehicle to initiate yaw motion based on that rear wheel spinning faster than the front. So as you go into a corner, the rear wheel is spinning faster, and that can actually make the car oversteer more like a rear-wheel drive vehicle. Speaking of handling dynamics, Acura has also gone back to a double wishbone front suspension, something that we had long seen from Honda and Acura in a wide variety of their products. I'm really glad the TLX has gone back to that design. It really bodes well for the overall handling feel. It's also worth noting that if you get the TLX Type S, they've made the platform able to handle 255 width tires. Those are pretty wide for a vehicle in this category, and hopefully those wide tires will also be able to be put onto the less powerful models. Now let's take a look at the inside. The first thing that I noticed is that we don't have a full LCD instrument cluster. I have to admit I'm a little bit surprised by this. Now it does have a large color display between the speedometer and tachometer, but it doesn't have that level of techie feel that I really had hoped that Acura would go for with this generation. There is a large available heads-up display, but I'm not entirely sure that that compensates for the lack of a big 12-inch LCD screen like we do find in some of the European competition. Acura is still definitely in love with buttons, so we find physical buttons for the climate control system, the heated and ventilated seats. We find a similar design to the center console with a large mode knob for the drivetrain, very similar to what we see in the Acura RDX. The display is crisp, the software is modern, and it's definitely, again, easier to use than the Lexus infotainment system. The screen is also positioned nice and high on the dashboard to give you a good view of the road without too much distraction. Speaking of the dashboard looks to be very, very stylized versus the current generation TLX, which was a little bit more restrained in overall style. So if you want something that looks aggressive and sporty, this is definitely going to be the option for you. It's definitely going in a different direction than we see a lot of the European entries here. Of course, as you'd expect in a luxury sedan like this, real wood trim is available. There's an open pore wood trim, and if you get the Type S, it looks like we're getting metal trim all over the dashboard with a lot of red accents as well. We get a pretty thick rimmed steering wheel by the looks of it with pretty aggressive sport grips. Acura has had great steering wheels before. I don't expect this to be any different. Again, tons of buttons all over the steering wheel, and if you take a quick peek behind the steering wheel, you'll notice that we get an updated instrument cluster with the silvery faces that we've seen in some of Acura's sporty models before. Acura's spec sheet does not say which trim levels you'll find this seat in, but we do know that at least available, there's going to be a 16-way power seat, and it's going to have the same range of motion for the driver and the front passenger, more like we see in the Europeans and a little bit different than what we see in the Lexus lineup. Another touch that we see in the European competition is, of course, ambient lighting. We will definitely get a ton of that in this interior, it looks like, and 24 selectable lighting schemes, each named after iconic performance driving destinations they claim, such as Pacific Coast. We also know that all 21 TLX models will come standard with Acura's active safety package called Acura Watch, and it's getting a few new features for 2021. We're getting traffic sign recognition, driver awareness monitoring, and their traffic jam assist function. That's sort of like more aggressive lane centering at lower speeds. The system works in coordination with the standard adaptive cruise control to keep you at a particular distance and then reduce overall driver fatigue in some of those mind-numbing situations. So how much will this set you back? Well, we don't know too much just yet, but let's make some assumptions. Acura says that it should start in the mid-$30,000 price range. Currently, the TLX starts at around $33,000, so expect this to be more expensive, probably around $35,000 to $37,000 for the base 2-liter turbocharged engine and, of course, front-wheel drive. Remember that the TLX has always been a bit big for the compact luxury segment, so even though this is priced like a Volvo S60, the TLX is sized more like a 5 Series or an A6, so expect more A6 kind of interior room rather than A4 interior room. That means that the TLX is at least 10 inches longer than most compact luxury sedans. So Lexus IS, the Mercedes-Benz C-Class, those are significantly smaller, and even something like a Volvo S60 is 5 inches shorter overall than the TLX. The TLX, interestingly, slots almost right between the S60 and the S90 in terms of overall size in the Volvo lineup. Volvo's overall pricing framework probably makes the most sense here to use as a comparison because I suspect the TLX is not going to be too far off that particular model. It also starts in the mid-30s, $36,000, so that's less expensive than a Lexus ES350, a longtime competitor of the Acura lineup. And currently, the Acura 3.5-liter V6 base model starts at $38,200, so that price range definitely makes an awful lot of sense. Now, for the 3-liter Type S, expect that to definitely be over $40,000. In fact, I would not be surprised if it was more like $50,000. Why? Well, a Volvo S60 T6 all-wheel drive, which is likely going to be slower than the TLX with that 3-liter turbo, starts at $40,550. And of course, something like a Mercedes-Benz C43 AMG or a BMW M440i or M340i, they definitely start up there in the $50,000 range. So I would expect the Type S to be up there with those rather than down here with the S60 T6. More likely than not, the Volvo corollary to that particular model is going to be Volvo's plug-in hybrid, which is obviously going to be a very different driving experience. I expect the TLX Type S to really be more of a direct competitor to something like that C43 or the BMW M340i, but we won't know more until we can get our hands on it. Hopefully, the shutdown will all end at some point and we'll be able to drive the TLX before this fall, so be sure and stay tuned for our full and complete review once we can get our hands on it. But in the meantime, if you're looking for one of the best values in the compact or mid-size luxury segment, depending on exactly how you want to categorize the TLX, it looks like they've really gotten their mojo back, and the TLX is going to be an absolutely excellent option here, and I'm really eager to see what the TLX Type S could be like. 255 with tires, a ton of power, 3-liter twin-turbo V6, 10-speed automatic transmission, and super handling all-wheel drive with some really interesting and adjustable front seats. What's not to love? Let me know down there in the comments section below. And of course, stay tuned because, again, I'll be getting you that video just as soon as I possibly can. I'll see all of you later.